Israel's strength and resilience, that comes deep from within us. That comes from our faith. It comes from this indomitable Jewish spirit that's there inside each and every single one of us. And that cause, that day of October 7th, found that spirit within each and every single one of us. So back in November of 2023, there was a columnist for the New York Times. You may have heard his name before. His name is Bret Stephens. Bret Stephens, who's Jewish, he wrote an op-ed piece. And his op-ed piece was titled, "For American Jews, Every Day Must Be October 8th." And it was a brilliant piece. And his column began by saying that after September 11th, 2001, someone put up a sign in the CIA headquarters, and it said, "Every day is September 12th." And that was a sense to the members of the CIA, remember what happened to us. Remember what happened to our country. Remember the World Trade Center. Remember all the attacks on our country. Remember it so that when you come to work and you're devoted to finding those responsible, you have that little extra edge to you. Don't forget. It was like our cry of Zachor, of remember. Every day is September 12th. Now Stephens writes about this, and he says we ought to have that same sign. Every day is September 8th. And that sign should hang in every Jewish organization. It should hang in every synagogue. It should hang literally as a necklace around every one of our necks. Remember how we're feeling today, because it's easy to forget. Every day is October 8th. The October 8th Jew must find his or her own Jewish voice and keep raising it going forward. Don't silence your voice. The October 8th Jew must understand the importance of unity and of solidarity and keep holding on to it for dear life going forward. That awakening that we experienced in response to the events of October 7th has to remain with us at all times. Not to keep us devastated, not to keep us down and depressed and horrified, but to keep us vigilant about the lessons that we have to learn from October 7th. All of those outpourings of love and concern and support and solidarity that we saw on display during those early days of the war can't be allowed to wane with the passage of time. Rather, each and every single one of us must figuratively wear a sign on our souls that says, today is October 8th. Some of you may remember the name of Rachel Frankel. If you don't, I'll remind you who Rachel Frankel was. If you go back to the summer of 2014, you may recall that there were 18 days in the summer of 2014 where all of the Jewish world was united in trying to find 3 Jewish teenagers that were kidnapped by Hamas. Israel came to a standstill. Everyone was just trying to find these 3 Jewish teenagers. Jewish all over the world, we gathered together to pray for the safety of these 3 Jewish teenagers. Rachel Frankel was the mother of one of these 3 boys. The unity that took place in the summer of 2014, again, was unlike anything I experienced up until October 8th. But you felt it. Sadly and tragically, after 18 days, we found the bodies of the 3 teenage boys. Rachel Frankel became a spokesperson. She speaks all over the world about those days and what it meant. She said this recently, a very powerful paragraph. She said, "I don't need the world to remember my son Naftali. That's the job of his family and his friends. They'll remember him. But what I do want the world to remember is how our global Jewish community behaved during those 18 days of uncertainty. Remember that feeling. Remember that unity. Remember that solidarity. Remember the power we had of unity, and don't ever forget that." Unfortunately, in recent months and weeks and days, we have begun to see the unity that we face following the days of October 7th begin to fray. We're starting to go back to the October 6th Jewish community, and we're forgetting to be the October 8th Jewish community. For a few months, this division came about because people were torn between two agonizing perspectives that were rooted in very raw emotions of a family that has suffered tremendous pain. Let me explain. On one side, especially within Israel, there were those who argued passionately that the most important thing for Israel to do was to bring the hostages home. That has to be number one on the list. That the Prime Minister has a responsibility more than anything else to bring the hostages home. The pain of knowing that our loved ones, that our brothers and our sisters were in the hands of Hamas, in hell in Gaza, in the hands of monsters, and that we're running out of time to save them was unbearable. And that emotion, that feeling, that compassion, that love for these hostages overrode everything else. And more than anything else, this group felt the hostages must come home. On the other side of the debate were those who cautioned that we have to be very wary of making concessions that will enable Hamas and terrorists to repeat the atrocities of October 7th. And releasing known terrorists, murderers, giving Hamas the ability to do this all over again, as they have clearly stated that they would. They have not done teshuvah yet. There's been no repentance. It's we're going to do it again and again. So if we were to release 1,000 terrorists, 2,000 terrorists, 4,000 terrorists, we would be inviting future attacks and kidnappings instead of breaking the cycle once and for all. Let's not forget that Sinwar himself, who orchestrated the October 7th attacks, was sitting in an Israeli prison before October 7th. Not only was he sitting in an Israeli prison, he was dying in an Israeli prison from a brain cancer, from a tumor. And Israeli doctors save his life. And then they release him in a terrorist exchange for an Israeli hostages, for one Israeli hostage. And then October 7th happens. These are excruciatingly painful and heart-wrenching dilemmas. Both sides have an argument to make. I know you're sitting here, you have leanings towards one side. I'm not interested in how you feel on it. What I want you to understand is that there's real emotion on both sides. Especially if you knew a family of one of the hostages. It's real, it's raw emotion. But this is what I know for sure, and this is what I want all of you to agree upon. Our brothers and our sisters are not the enemy. Hamas was the enemy. They did this to us. They took advantage of our love for our own people, of our compassion for our own people, of our humanity and of our morality. And they knew how we would react knowing that one of our brothers and sisters are suffering as a hostage in Gaza. They knew exactly how we would start arguing with one another. They played on the love that a Jew has for a family member. Because if any of them were hostage anywhere in the world, they couldn't care less. You see, the first thing they did when they had so-called freedom of the IDF pulling out was murder their own in front of the cameras of the world. But for us, this was painful. And yes, it caused debate. And yes, demonstrations. Yes, division. But let's understand where it's coming from. It's coming from an argument, a painful argument amongst a family. We can't let the October 6th division become the post-October 8th division. We can argue as a family. We can have different opinions as the family if we keep in mind ultimately who was the enemy and who is family. We can't allow ourselves to become divided by differences of opinion. Our true enemies love nothing more than to see us turn on each other, because that weakens us. That turns us into our own enemies, and we can't allow it to happen. One of the hostages that were released in the 55-day mark, was Sapir Cohn. We had her, if you remember, on the Zoom lecture that we did last year. She was one of the original 251 hostages. Her boyfriend was just released a few weeks ago. Sapir Cohn said this: she was held captive in a series of tunnels and homes of Hamas terrorists. She actually came face to face with Sinwar in the early days. And one of her encounters with one of those holding her hostage said to her this: when Jews are like this, then Israel is strong. And we don't stand a chance. But Israel may be like this now, but very soon they'll be going at each other. And when they do that, Israel is weak and we are strong. You're hearing it directly from them. It's their goal to divide us. That's what they play on. That's exactly why they took hostages. They knew what this would do, how it would divide a country, how it would divide a people. We can't let them do that to us. Indeed, our collective outrage must be directed at Hamas and at Hezbollah and Iran and the Houthis and the rest of the monsters who started this war, not at each other. We must come together and we must stay together, just like we did on October 8th. We can't go back to the division of October 6th, as tempting as it is sometimes. So no matter what goes on in the Knesset, no matter whether you like the Prime Minister or you don't like the Prime Minister, no matter if you like the President in the White House or you don't like the President of the White House, no matter what political party you belong to, no matter what issues are important to you, no matter the debate, you have to remember, overriding it all, we are debating within a family. And if you sat at a dinner table and your brother or your sister has a different opinion, you're still going to stick to your guns. You're still going to say your opinion, but you're doing so as a family member. That's critical that we always remember. 1977 in Israel. Let's see, those of you that remember your Israeli day, modern day history. 1977, what happens in Israel? There's an earthquake, not a physical earthquake. A political earthquake takes place in Israel, 1977. Menachem Begin is elected Prime Minister of Israel. Why is that such a shock? Because since 1948, Israel belonged to the Labor Party. Menachem Begin from the Likud Party is always in opposition, always outnumbered. In 1977, he wins a shock election, becomes the Prime Minister of Israel. This is the first time the right has control of the prime ministership in Israel. Well, again, if you know your Israeli politics, winning an election is one thing. Forming a government is an entirely different thing. It doesn't work like it works in this country, that you win an election and you go into the White House. It doesn't work that way. You win an election, you're given the right to try to form a government. To form a government, what's the magic number? 61. You got to get 61 votes in the Knesset in order to actually be the Prime Minister. So even Menachem Begin, who wins as the Likud Party, needs to put together 61. And who does he think is his natural allies? He's going for the religious parties. Okay? Now, religious parties, by the way, play both sides. They've been part of labor governments, part of right-wing governments. They go whatever's best for them. But Begin feels he can make some deals with the religious parties. And so there's a meeting that takes place in the days after the election with Menachem Begin trying to put it together, a governing coalition. He's meeting at the same time with 7 members of the religious party. He's got 7 of these religious guys in his office. And they came in with their demands. This is what we want, and this is what we want, and this is the seat that we want, this is the cabinet position we want, this is the money we want. Oh, they have their list of things. And the meeting is getting hostile. There's screaming going on. In this meeting, there's someone named Hart Haston. Hart Haston is a successful businessman. He's a close friend and advisor of Menachem Begin. He's sitting in on this meeting. He later writes about this meeting, how it went, and he writes about the hostility in the room. And when the religious party finished their diatribe, really digging into Begin, it's now Begin's turn to respond. And this is what Begin says. He said it in Yiddish, because he's speaking to a group of rabbis. And he says, Rabbi Isai, what does that mean? My dear rabbis, hat schon gedaven mincha? Did you guys daven mincha yet? Mincha is the afternoon prayer. And they're looking like, what's he talking about? We're here talking politics. But we're rabbis, so we have to. He's asking legitimate questions. The afternoon, we didn't daven mincha yet. So they say, no, we didn't daven. So he says, so you're 7, I'm 8, Haston is 9, I'll call my chief of staff in, we got a minyan, let's daven mincha here. So they take a break from their hostilities, and they make a minyan for the afternoon service right there in Begin's office. By the time they finished mincha, they sat down, they worked out a deal within 10 minutes. And what he writes is what Begin did. He disarmed his political adversaries by pivoting to common ground. Once you're part of a quorum together, you're part of a minyan together, you're not going to fight the same way you fought before. It was totally different. It was, let's work this out. And they did. And the rest is history, one of the great prime ministers of Eretz Yisrael of Israel. When we stand together as one people, we can overcome huge challenges that we think that we cannot overcome. And that's what we have to remember as we go forward, post-October 7th. The Torah tells us that God's eye is constantly on the land of Israel. This means that whatever happens in Israel and to Israel, there's divine providence involved. God is watching over Israel. But that also means that it's merit-based. It means God's watching us and responding in kind. When we say and we sing and we put up billboards with the words Am Yisrael Chai, it's such a powerful statement, right? The nation of Israel lives. There's so much that goes into those 3 words. It's not just lives today. It's like we live for thousands of years. What we live through, Am Yisrael Chai. But it's also a prayer. We're praying when we say it. Am Yisrael Chai, we should live. If you look at Hebrew, when it's written without the vowels, the same word can be said different way. We can say Am Yisrael Chai, or we can say Im Yisrael Chai. Im Yisrael Chai means together. Together. How does Israel survive? When we're together. When we're one Am, when we're one nation and we're united, Chai, that's when we live. In the crematoria of the concentration camps, the ashes of the Hasidim, the ashes of the pious ones, the ashes of the radicals, the ashes of the atheists, they were all together. They didn't separate. We fight enemies who do not differentiate between Jews who believe in God and Jews who claim that they don't. Several years ago at the annual March of the Living, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, who was then the chief rabbi of Israel and a Holocaust survivor himself, was standing at Auschwitz when he said this: "We always knew how to die together. The time has come for us to know how to live together." October 8th. There was a Chabad Chassid, a follower of Chabad, from the East Coast, who tragically got the phone call that his son died in the October 7th attacks. He's here in America. His son is in Israel. The funeral is going to take place in Israel. He gets to the airport to get on one of the El Al flights to be here and be in Eretz Yisrael in time for his son's funeral. As you probably know by now, there are some Chabad folks who will seize any opportunity to give their fellow Jew a chance to put on tefillin. So they'll ask you, did you put on tefillin today? And if not, would you like to put them on? Just say the Shema. And it's not just done here. It's done on the streets all over the world. If any of you have visited the Kotel, it's hard to get by my friend Rabbi Weiss, who's standing there at his booth. He's put on more tefillin than anyone probably in the history of the world. Go to the Manhattan, on the street corners of Manhattan, someone's going to ask you. That's what we're trained as a young child growing up to do. This particular Chabadnik was generally not one that did that. He was socially more to himself. He was shy. He was quiet. So it wasn't something that he ordinarily did. But he's sitting on this El Al flight. He's flying to Israel for his son's funeral. He knows he's on a plane filled with Jews. And he starts feeling guilty. Should I not put on tefillin with some of these people in the memory of my son? And it gets to him. So he takes his tefillin. He turns to his neighbor sitting next to him and he says, would you like to put on tefillin? The fellow says, no thanks. Okay, he'll try another person. He goes to the person sitting behind him. Would you like to put on tefillin? Nah, not for me. He tries one more time. The next line, no. By the next person, he finally says it. And he says the reason he's asking them. My son was murdered yesterday on October 7th. I want to do something in his memory. I don't know what to do. I'm here on the plane. I'm flying to his funeral. I just want to do something in his memory. Would you like to put on tefillin? And the fellow says, of course. He rolls up his sleeve. He immediately puts on the tefillin. He says the Shema. But the person that's sitting in the front that said no before, but now he heard the explanation, says, I can't be some schmo bagel here that's not going to do it. His son died yesterday. So he motions to him like, I'm next. And then the guy that was sitting next to him says, you didn't tell me the full story. I'm next. And before you know it, it's spreading all along the plane that this chassid is putting on tefillin with people in the memory of his son who died yesterday. And everyone is lining up on this El Al flight to put on tefillin. The pilot has a camera and he sees what's going on in the back of the plane and he calls for the flight attendant and he says, why is everyone standing on the aisle? And she explains, he lost his son yesterday. He's asking people to put on tefillin in his son's memory. And the pilot turns to his co-pilot and says, take over. And he goes to put on tefillin as well. That's where we were October 8th. That's who we were. We weren't religious overnight. We weren't in the mood of putting on tefillin suddenly, but it was different. We felt different about each other. It didn't matter if the person was a chassid or a secular or an atheist. It didn't matter. We were one family. Captain Yisrael Ben Shitrit was wounded in Gaza while rescuing other wounded soldiers. He was being interviewed by a Arutz Sheva news station when they put up a picture of the Gaza war on the screen. And he looks at the picture and he says to the reporter, you know, Gaza is an amazing place. The reporter says, I've heard it called a lot of things. I've never heard it called an amazing place. It's hell on earth. It's bad. It's ugly. You can say a lot. Amazing place? He says, yeah, it's an amazing place. Because when we're fighting in Gaza, together with my brothers, we're one. We're so one. We could be in Israel, we could be opposing, we could be fighting, we could be screaming at each other, we could be at each other's necks. But when we were there, wow, we were one. How do we remain that? How do we keep that in mind? How do we stay there? We need to show the world that we make no apologies of being proud members of an ancient tribe that sticks together as we pursue our mission of making the world a more sane and civilized place. So let's show that within this inner Jew that we have lies the courage to fight back. And there are many ways in which we fight back. We fight back by having joyful Shabbat tables with our family. We fight back by performing kindness for one another, by caring for our families, by praying for the IDF, for standing up for goodness, for truth at every single turn. There's so many ways every Jew on the face of the earth can fight back, even if you're not a member of the IDF. You need to appreciate that the gift of unity and the gift of community is so important to us, especially now. You live in a Jewish community. Take advantage of it. You're doing so by coming to a class. Come more often. The Shabbat service is near you. Come more often. Feel that sense of a family, that you are part of one family, even if you disagree, even if you're more religious or less religious. You're one. I want to conclude this segment with this final story. There's a man in Israel, his name is Ari Eldad. Ari Eldad has a very interesting job. He goes to graduating classes, to high schools all throughout Israel. He meets with the senior class, and his job is to prepare them for the following year, when they're going to be drafted into the IDF. As you can imagine, it's not so easy for a 17-year-old kid to know what next year is going to be like, what it's like to go through training. Just explaining the steps. This is what happens. This is how long training will go. This is how you're going to be sent into different divisions of the Israeli army. How much of a say do you have? How much of a say do you not have? All of the questions that a 17-year-old have, they ask of Ari Eldad. And he does a course with each 12th grade. He comes back a few times during the year. He's a very warm fellow. He's a charismatic fellow. And the kids love him. He really knows how to present his material. The last thing he does with each graduating class is a field trip. He takes them out on a field trip. And the place that he goes with them is to Har Herzl, Mount Herzl in Jerusalem. And there, that's the burial site for all of the soldiers who gave their lives defending Eretz Yisrael. And it's a very solemn day, it's a serious day, but he talks about the sacrifice that these people have made and what we owe to those people that are living eternally on this holy site. Now, if you've ever been to Har Herzl, it's divided into sections. There's the 1948 section. That means all those who died defending Israel in the 1948 war. Each of the wars have their own section. They have the Six-Day War section, the Yom Kippur War section. Sadly, there is this Gaza section, the Gaza War of today. They went to the 1948 section. And in that 1948 section, there's an area where there are 70 soldiers that are buried. All died on the very same day during the War of Independence. They actually all died in the very same battle. Let me just get a new mic. I'll be right back. A new battery. There was a terrible battle that took place on the road to Jerusalem, and we lost 70 soldiers right there in that one battle. There was one of the 70 tombstones that was different than the other. They all had the date, they all had the area where they died. But the one stone of the 70 that was different didn't have a name. It said in Hebrew, Almoni, the anonymous soldier. No name. So obviously the students ask Ari, why don't they have his name on the tombstone? So he says, I'll tell you the story of this soldier. He was a lone survivor of the Holocaust. His entire family was wiped out. Parents, siblings, grandparents, everyone. He came to what was then called Palestine on one of the illegal ships that came in under the British mandate. They snuck around the British mandate, which wouldn't allow any other survivors in. But there were some ships that made it through. This lone survivor was on one of those ships. He arrives in Eretz Yisrael. The people greeting those at the ship say to him, we're being attacked by 7 armies. We need fighters. They gave him a gun. They showed him how to use the gun. And they drafted him into the army, right off the boat. The very next day, there was this epic battle in which 70 soldiers died in that single day on the road near Jerusalem. And this young survivor was one of the 70. When it came time to bury him, they discovered a double tragedy. Not only was he killed, but no one even knew his name. There was no time for forms or applications or anything. It was, you're off the boat, here's a gun, we're being attacked. No one recorded his name. Now maybe his comrades that were fighting with him that day asked him, what's your name? And they knew his name, but they were all dead too. So there was no one to ask. So they buried him together with all the other soldiers, but they literally put on the tombstone, Almoni, the anonymous one, because they didn't know his name. These future young draftees are looking at this grave, and Ari explains, I want you to understand why this boy said yes when he was asked, do you want to go fight, the moment he came off a ship, because he just lived through the 30s and early 40s when Jews were running for their lives and no one was there to help them, to save them, to protect them. He knew what that was like. And here he had a chance to fight back finally, to say, no, this is our land. And we're not going to allow you to send us to concentration camps and to gas chambers. He grabbed that opportunity. That's why all of these soldiers are buried here. So that we finally have the chance to say to the world, it's our land and we're here to stay and we're willing to put our lives on the line for it. The teenagers hearing this are so moved. And one of them says, Ari, but who says Kaddish for this boy if he doesn't have a family? Ari says, no one. There's no relatives. I said, but that's just not right. Can't Israel put out a call to ask if anyone's a cousin, a second cousin, a third cousin? He says, cousin of whom? Who? How do you do that? He says, but today there's DNA. Can't we find the DNA? He says, but DNA needs to match to something. We're going to ask 14 million people to give in their DNA and see if we have a match. And they're all frustrated. There has to be some way to find a relative. The class says Kaddish right there and then, and they say, then we will say Kaddish for him, and they said Kaddish. Fast forward in my story to a year and a half later. All of these boys are now drafted, they're all part of the army, they finished their training, they're all serving in different parts of Israel. Ari Eldad gets a call from one of them, and he's told, you remember the class from this and this school? We're all serving in different parts of Israel right now. But I want you to know that when we left the cemetery that day that you took us, a year and a half ago, we decided that we were going to make it our class project to find some relative of Almoni, of the anonymous one. And guess what? We found a relative. We found a relative. Ari says, that's not possible. Yes, it is. We applied ourselves. We found a relative. And do you know what today is? Today is the yard site of the 70. Today is the day they all passed away. And we have been given permission, all of us in our different parts of the army, to leave today for an hour. We're going to go to Jerusalem. We're going on Har Herzl, and we're meeting the relative that we found. And together we're going to say Kaddish at the anonymous one that is no longer anonymous. And we want to invite you to join us today. Ariel, that is blown away. He's so proud of this class. Wow, they took upon themselves a mission, a homework assignment. They pulled it through. I've told the story of Almoni so many times to every class, and now I'm going to meet a relative. I'm there. I'm going. And Ari Eldad shows up an hour later at Har Herzl, and he comes to the gravesite of Almoni, and he sees the class. They're all in their army uniforms right now. They're all there. And he's looking around, and he doesn't see anyone else. And they say to him, Matzanu hamishpacha shelo, we found his family. Anachnu hamishpacha shelo. We are the family. We are the family. We're one. This is our brother. And he understood that these kids, they internalized, they got it. They understand what Israel is. That's the gift of Jewish identity. That's the gift of Jewish unity, knowing that you're an indispensable part of an extraordinary nation, that we are brothers, that we are sisters, that we're linked together. My friends, with God's help, Hamas will be completely destroyed and defeated. And with God's help, the war will actually come to an end. And all of the soldiers will be able to return home to their loved ones. But what must not end, however, is the imperative of preserving our love and our loyalty and our commitment to one another, always remembering that we're one nation with one soul looking out for one another. May the sounds of all the thousands of sirens of incoming missiles that Israel has had to endure, not just for the past 2 years, but for decades, soon be replaced by music, by the sounds of rejoicing. May all the tears of mourning give way to tears of joy and jubilation. And may we merit to indeed stand as one as we behold the onset of an era of eternal peace and eternal harmony, not only for our nation, but for all of mankind. May it be speedily in our days, and let us say, Amen. Amen.